just like the one up there near the big mausoleum. There are 44 veterans buried here, most of them being Civil War soldiers. And after this, when this began to get full, and of course, you know, World War I, everybody thought was the war was going to end all wars, and there wouldn't be many more veterans. But when World War II started, they realized they'd need more space, so they created that area up there. As I said, there are 44 veterans. I don't know where this cannon came from, but I presume it is an authentic, what's left of an authentic Civil War artillery piece. But as I said, most of these are Civil War soldiers. Many more buried throughout the cemetery. Anywhere you look, you can see flags marking the grave of some veteran of whatever war. And these ones with the people always ask me what these mean. This is my chance to tell everybody at one time. You see the words GAR, letters GAR on here? That means Grand Army of the Republic. And after the Civil War, they organized a veterans organization. This is like the American Legion or the VFW of the Civil War. All the veterans joined the Grand Army of the Republic. That was simply their veterans organization, and a powerful organization at one time. They managed to shove a lot of legislation through Congress to benefit veterans. And they had a group for the women called WRC, the Women's Relief Corps. And if you ever see on a marker, or I don't know if they have flag staffs, I've never noticed that, but it'll say WRC, and that's the Women's Relief Corps. That was simply the auxiliary. After they began to run out of veterans in the 1920s, a lot of their widows and wives were allowed to join the GAR simply to keep the lodge going and simply to have enough members. But that's what that means, and that's the old flagstaff. And if you ever see one of these for sale at a flea market by a dealer, he's doing something illegal. These are property of the United States government. And it wasn't too long ago, there was an auction where one of these was advertised. And I called the Veterans Service Office and I said, I believe that's illegal, is it? And he said, yes. He wrote the auctioneer a letter, and I noticed it wasn't sold at that sale. So but those are government property. If one ever turns up in your possession, it really isn't supposed to be there. But anyway, just a word of warning. I don't want to see anybody go to jail that doesn't have to. So from here, we will march right up where you could ever be, because it has all those low-hanging limbs to it. One thing Jamie mentioned about the tree falling on the mausoleums don't belong to the cemetery, they belong to the families. Just the big mausoleum we own. But these other ones would be, and of course the family's responsibility, but where do you find the family? Most of them are inside, so, or they've scattered to the four winds, so we have some problem there about taking care of those.
That's one of the reasons that very few people will build mausoleums now, because the cemetery boards will require that they set up a trust fund for them. And nobody wants to do that, so they just end up doing it from there. All right, I'm done.
That's all right. Well, I've said this different times. I do not understand a family built those like in the 1880s and 1890s, and I guess just thought things were going to go on forever. I mean, they built them to be buried in or entombed in when they died, but who did they think was going to take care of them 150 years from then? But nobody thought about that.
What's their worry?
No, I realize that.
Yeah.
That was not my problem, man.
Is that why that one down here is not fixed?
It's going to be fixed, but yes, because there's no one to contact. And they didn't leave $10,000. Well, if they left $10,000, that would hardly pay a contractor to drive up there and look at it. Well, this is the burial place of Thomas Buckingham, who was one of the Revolutionary soldiers buried here. Some people say he doesn't qualify as one. He worked for the government as a teamster and a cattle driver for the Army, but other ones say yes, he does qualify as a veteran, so we mark him as such and consider him as such. One of the several burials moved here from the old cemetery. Someone puts flowers here. Do you know who that is?
No, but they're there every year.
I've noticed that. I wonder.
Could that be some of Buckingham's from the Nova?
No. Different Buckingham. They're not from the palace either.
Not this one, not these, huh?
Hey Jamie, it's too late to ask you, but do you have a key, to that Backerstock mausoleum?
Oh, no. We only got a key for now, it's the tightest that we know works. All the rest of them are, the locks have been broken off and are fastened through with chains.
I'm just going to mention it used many years ago, and it was a long time when I was a little kid, the mausoleum on the right up here is called Backerstock Mr. and Mrs. Backerstock had some of their household goods, a couple of 3 rocking chairs and a table, and their portraits placed in that mausoleum. I presume they're still there, except now it's secured. It used to be the door was open, but I suppose the key is gone somewhere. It's gone the way of all flesh, I suppose. But we're not going to walk up there because you can't see in it anyway. Sid, we're going to angle right over through here. The upper hill. And it looks so open all of a sudden in here. But we'll get some planted pretty soon. This is the Cole family lot. You can see most of these markers have the name of Cole. This is the largest family lot here in the cemetery. There are 39 burials on it. I don't think that has changed. Maybe it's changed by one. And 43 different monuments. The Cole family lived out in the southwest corner of Norwalk Township. One of the first settlers here. And these older burials here, there are 4. I don't know if there's any more than that. Their names are on this marker, and they were moved here from their family cemetery on the farm, and it says it right there in the bottom, removed from the Cole family burying ground in 1877. A lot of people in the early days, when transportation was hard, they couldn't get anywhere, someone died, they buried them on the home farm on a high spot or a spot near the woods or something, and had a family cemetery, and that was the case with these people. And but in 1877, the family decided to buy a lot, buy a big lot here in Woodlawn, enough room for 40 people to be buried, and had these burials moved in. You'll notice on this side, Jeremy Cole died in 1818. His father, Levi Cole, died in 1820. Levi Cole was one of the very first settlers in this area, and if you ever get a chance to read any of the history of the area, as I have a couple times, you'll see lots about Levi Cole. He was a very active pioneer. He was one of those let's go get him kind of person. And all these burials clear over to over there are all his family members. And this monument right here next to us is Dr. Tift. It's not on the tour, but he was one of the original incorporators of the Norwalk Cemetery Association and was on the board until he died in the 1870s. And he had a great deal to do with beautifying the cemetery. Laid out these driveways, they planted ornamental trees, they planted shrubs and so forth, and needless to say, he got his pick of a nice lot. So he got a nice lot here on the high ground, and that he had a great deal to do with developing the cemetery. And let's see, we'll move the burial place of General Franklin Sawyer from the Civil War. He was actually he only had a battlefield commission as general. He never, I don't believe he ever held the permanent rank. He commanded the 8th Ohio Infantry during the Civil War, and at the battle, he was shot up pretty badly off and on in other instances, but at the Battle of Gettysburg, the 8th Ohio held one end of the line against Pickett's charge. When Pickett charged across the wheat field toward Cemetery Ridge, the 8th Ohio held one end of it. And if you ever go to Gettysburg, not very far from the Visitors Center, there's a tall monument to the 8th Ohio, and it mentions General Sawyer of Norwalk, Ohio. So he suffered a lot during the war from his injuries. Of Reverend David Higgins, who was a Presbyterian minister and also served in the American Revolution. He's one of the 3 buried here. As I said, they were all moved here later from the Episcopal Cemetery after this cemetery was developed, and kind of disappointed to notice this year how much this has faded. However, if we took a piece of chalk and rubbed over that lettering, it would probably stand out. But the purists tell you don't do that, you damage the stone. What they do is, you know, you ever see they have tracing paper, big roll of paper, and they put it up here and they rub over on the paper, and the inscription rubs off. And there's a long inscription on here about his career, and the fact that he ended up living here in Norwalk in his old age and died here in 1842. So as they say, he's very good family member of one of the American Revolution, veterans of the American Revolution. Now we'll walk over here. And buried right here is Theodore Williams, who was born January 3rd, 1820 here in Norwalk. He was the first baby born in the little village of Norwalk. The town was 3 years old, and his father was an attorney. His father and mother are buried over here, James Williams and Sarah. His father was a lawyer and came to Norwalk to be the clerk of courts for Huron County. But Theodore was born in 1820, and he lived 87 years here in Norwalk. Lived all his life here and saw it go from a place that Indians were riding through in covered wagons going west up until we had electric lights and railroads and streetcars and paved streets and running water and what have you. Right over in there where that large cross is the burial place of a man named Darwin Gardner, who was a family connection of the Williamses. And Darwin was born later the same day as Theodore Williams on the lot where, next to the theater where Catholic Charities office is now, what used to be Mahali's studio. And he died in Toledo in the 1870s, I believe it was, and his wish was that they take dirt from the lot where he was born and put it in the bottom of his grave so that he would rest in his native soil. He wanted to be not only buried in Woodlawn, but he wanted something from where he had been born downtown. His father was a doctor here in Norwalk, Dr. William Gardner. But these two were born the same day, but Theodore beat him to it. So
Who built the big Williams home?
Williams.
Didn't he live in that house up there next to the
Yeah, Theodore Williams. This Theodore Williams here built the house that was later Mahali's. Without the pillars, without the columns on it. They didn't have that front porch then.
Used to be the Elks.
Yeah. But yes, and his parents, James Williams and Sarah, lived right next door where the theater is. Their house was torn down when the theater was built in the 1930s. But there, many of their family connections are buried here.
I do.
Now, we'll walk down and I'll show you the receiving vault. Maybe not everybody wants to go down there. It's down here. Is it open, Jamie? Or not?
No sweat.
Okay. I know it probably...
It's worth seeing just for the architecture.
Yeah. Anyway, if you don't want to go clear down there, you don't have to, but reaching to the person in heaven probably.
The bad thing about these, you don't know their names.
So it's a great site there.
Yeah.
This is horrible.
Anyone may go in who wants to, however, I'll stay out here and watch them for you.
You're okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you explain about the shelves you put on, and I can show them.
This is the receiving vault. The reason this was built was so that in the winter, when it was bad weather and very cold, they could store the caskets until spring and then have the burials in better weather. And as I said, it was hard to dig. They didn't have power equipment, and the culmination of it all was the one day when two men worked for 8 or 10 hours with axes trying to dig a grave in the frozen ground. This formerly had metal brackets along each side. I don't know if any of them are there anymore.
You can see where they're going.
Yeah. And I believe they could store something like 32 caskets in here for the winter. In some of the other communities, such as Old Collins, New London, or Monroeville, might also bring a burial here and store it until they could have the burial service and tend to it. Obviously, he was down somewhere low. I haven't looked in here in a long time. In Norwalk. Matter of fact, he was killed while he was building the glass block in 1893. But he was the builder, which probably explains one reason why it's so good. He had his own quarry out in Bronson Township where he quarried the stones. He also built the Gardner block where the National City Bank is there in East Main Street, among other things. This actually is a beautiful building. It's just a shame it's where it is and what it is. But it was a necessity in that time. The secret combination now, Jamie's going to like this.
What's happened is it's had so much freezing and thawing and everything is heaved. And then this is pulled out of the brick. I think every kid in Norwalk's been in here just least once.
All I'll say is we don't want to know everything that's happened down here. We really don't. Of course, this gentleman, Milton W. Goodnow, he died in January of 1851 in Texas. He had gone there because he was, I suppose, had TB or lung trouble for his health. His brother-in-law went out there, started for there. The place where he died, he was staying at somebody's ranch, and they packed him in some kind of preservative, shipped the body by steamboat to New Orleans. I think he met